and record.
Let's bow in, everyone. Welcome to the course on the Buddhist path of awakening. We're well into the Mahayana now, studying the teachings of emptiness and the Bodhisattva path. Tonight we're going through chapters 23 and 24, dealing with concepts and Shunyata, prajna and compassion. So Barry will start with the first chapter. Barry.
Okay. This chapter was really something I started out feeling like it didn't make much sense, and in the end I found so much meat to work on here that I have to apologize because I have kind of notes in a few different places, but let's see how it goes. He starts out saying, at the true Shunyata level, having experienced Kündzop completely and properly, we realize that Kündzop is problematic. We realize that clinging to relative reality is not particularly workable, wise, or inspiring. Now, remember, Kündzop is relative truth, relative reality. If I've got this right, Kun is all, and Zop is outfit or clothing. So this is the conceptual layer that we cover everything with. Therefore, it's all relative. It's everything we experience normally is overlaid, that's clothed in conceptualizations. It's the world seen by the eyes of ego. And it is the experience most of us have most of the time. The heading of this section, by the way, dropping conceptual fixations, is important, and I think that's a key here. This starts when we begin to understand and experience the nature of this, of Kündzop, with meditation informed by the teachings. And just as we learn to see thoughts as thoughts in meditation, we begin to see how our view of things in everyday life is distorted, overlaid with judgments of all kinds. We can start to understand and identify all of this as Kündzop. This is what he means by having experienced Kündzop completely and properly. And it is not particularly workable, as he says, because it's not real. So we begin to see how we're clinging to relative reality, and seeing this can help us to stop that clinging to the dreams that occupy so much of our experience. He says, everything that we experience, such as tables, chairs, or whatever, is based on fixation. And that fixation is already empty by itself. So the realization of this is Shunyata. And we can approach that by contemplating the nature of our fixations. Examining those fixations leaves us with nothing substantial. Like, what are these fixations? A fixation here is, it's identifying something as our attention is drawn to a thing, and we separate it out from everything else. The fact is, we can only really direct our attention at one thing. It may not seem like it, but it's true. It's like multitasking doesn't really exist. All we can do is rapidly switch from one to another. So when our attention is drawn to something and instead of just seeing it, there's a kind of engagement that happens, a fixation, and it's separated out from everything else. And it's separate from us. So we see something, we bring it forward, we fix on it, we fix it in time and space, and then evaluate it. We seem to need this to give us some sense of stability, I guess. Anyway, all of this in our normal experience is terribly real and immediate. But if we examine the situation carefully, things start to get fuzzy. He says, if we have an idea of something, the subject of the idea, the object of the idea, and the concept of the idea are all divided into so many sections that finally we could just ask, who had such an idea? Where did the idea come from? Where is the final conclusion taking place? This is a Madhyamaka approach. It's kind of an analytical exploration. He says, due to fixation, we would like to hang on to something extremely vague and uncertain. It's vague and uncertain because if you examine it, it's not real. If we're able to go beyond fixation of who possesses what, then we might understand that there is no possessor of such a situation. So when letting go of our fixations, as he says, there is just complete openness, complete spontaneousness, and non-existence. And later on in the reading, he makes a point that emptiness does not, Shunyata, and empty does not mean non-existence. It just means that we're no longer attaching these meanings to. Now, that fuzziness, that vagueness that you can experience is no longer an uncertainty. It's simply the recognition that nothing is static, nothing can be pinned down. He says vagueness is a panoramic quality. It is the ideal perception of Vipassana that Hinayana's dream of attaining. It is ultimate, all-pervasive awareness. I like that. So it's vague because of the absence of detail, because of the abundance of detail, excuse me. And when we see this clearly, then this becomes the panoramic Vipassana view. So full of precision. Now, Shunyata, he says the basic notion of Shunyata at this point is that which is empty of its own conceptualizations. So in our normal samsaric experience, everything is full of conceptualization. And because of that, there is a disconnect between anything we perceive, the perception of it, and the thing itself. That we name things, we apply these labels. He talks about just plopping a label onto it. That there is the thing and then what we name it, what we label it. Our sense of things is not the thing, It's pretty easy to demonstrate. If I hold this up, you can see a glass here with something in it. But each one of you and myself are going to have a very different idea of what this is and what kind of meanings it has. And, I have certain ideas and memories about the glass, the contents of it. Each one of us is in that moment creating our own idea of what it is. And none of it is the thing itself. And every one of ours take on it is different, which, if you think about it, is a clear demonstration of emptiness. That these things aren't the thing. They're just our ideas about it. Anyway, yeah, he refers to conceptualizations about Shunyata as red tape. But seeing Shunyata has to be direct. And of course, one of the biggest obstacles to arriving at Shunyata is attempting to achieve it. He says the study of Shunyata takes place in your mind, but what is your mind? Who made your mind? Who is your mind? What is your mind? Where is it coming from? Where is it going? Who do you want to study Shunyata? These questions, if you spin enough, he says, if you get dizzy enough, you might come to some kind of sense. This is a Madhyamaka approach. Also, that you encounter in Zen koans, for instance. It's a way to spin us out of our familiar turf and give our minds the opportunity to open up to a new panoramic sense of things. Let me see. Okay. So, taking off our fixation on things as they are, he says, taking off our fixations begins to plant a seed in our mind known as Buddha nature. So, Shunyata is not something to achieve. It is something that is there. It's by stripping away all the conceptual layers that it begins to emerge, to plant the seed of Buddha nature. And this is entering a very different world, the world of vivid, ever-changing, phenomenal display. He says, without fixations, things are seen as they are, and there is some kind of basic intelligence taking place. Things are seen to be both colorful and empty of conceptualizations. We see things, they communicate, and in that instant, there is a communication, and nothing else is required. So, I get the pronunciation of this wrong. Okay. Döndam, yeah, is the perception of Shunyata. Reality, he says. I say, Shunyata and Döndam is the same thing. That's what it's describing. Döndam, or absolute truth, is connected with the perception of Shunyata, and with Shunyata, you are relating with reality. Bang, there you have it. But, he says, we are not talking about absorption into the higher spiritual or any kind of realm or gift of God, but about a very simple, straightforward, direct rediscovery of yourself through the inspiration of Buddha nature. And it's worth hearing that reminder sometimes, because it's really easy in meditation, if you're really serious about this, to try to develop some kind of elevated, enlightened state or something. And that's just a dead end. The understanding, realization of Kündzop is a necessary stepping stone to Döndam. So we're talking about Kündzop. This is relative reality. He says Döndam is Madhyamaka style and Döndam is Yogacara style. No, Döndam is Madhyamaka style and Kündzop is Yogacaran style. But he is saying here that this relative reality is not left behind, but there is a kind of a development. And it relates to something John talked about, I guess 2 weeks ago, with the Yogacaran understanding of three truths. There is, okay, which one is which is which? Okay. There is pure relative truth, and there is impure, defiled relative truth. So the distorted, false relative truth is the same as Kündzop. And it's a total immersion in samsara. This is the place where you hear people in the God realm experience water as ambrosia, and people in the hell realm experience it as molten iron. That everything's experienced at that realm. Then there is I'm sorry, I keep confusing these terms. Yes, Kündzop. So Kündzop, there's that, totally confused, Kündzop. And then there is the Kündzop that is the more kind of pure Kündzop, which is that there's still a me there, an I there, seeing things, and it is still relative truth, but it has been stripped of the conceptual overlay, so you can begin to see things clearly. So in the beginning of this chapter, the impure or confused Kündzop is what he's talking about. I hope that wasn't too confusing. Anyway, so it's important to understand Kündzop, and it is a stepping stone, and it is not left behind, as we'll go into a little more here. But Kündzop can be seen as an appreciation of things as they are. Now, working up to I'm sorry, I got another misspelling here. But anyway, working up to Döndam, it is necessary to really understand Kündzop first. And through that understanding, then we can begin to not be attached to it. He says, the activities of the Bodhisattva are based on skillful means and wisdom working side by side like two wings of a bird. Skillful means is Kündzop and wisdom is Döndam. See, Kündzop here, that is the pure relative truth of the Paratantra, Yogacara and Paratantra, stripped of distortions and conceptual fixations. And that makes skillful means possible. This is when we're engaged in the world in a genuine way. So skillful means working with this relative world which has no true existence. But there it is. This is like the thing that has come up before. Things do not exist, and yet they appear. They appear, and yet they do not exist. So, because there still are things there, and this is the Kündzop. They do not exist, that's the Döndam. Okay, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. He also talks about the importance of understanding that this is something that it takes time to develop. You have to work through it. And at this point, he talks about footprints, which I just love this image here. He says, each experience of truth leaves a footprint, which still must be shed. As we go along the path, there are constant footprints which become lighter and lighter until the attainment of Vajra-like samadhi. You see, what he's talking about here is when there is some kind of a flash of openness or shunyata. Ooh, that's shunyata. Well, in that moment, we're now experiencing an echo of it. It's in the rearview mirror. And it's like it leaves a footprint. We keep turning around and seeing that footprint. Yeah, that was Shunyata. And then, of course, we want to try to reproduce that, understand it, and talk about it, which removes us further and further from the actual experience. So every time we have an experience like that, it leaves a footprint. And as we progress along the path, then those footprints become lighter and lighter and fade away. The I who just saw Shunyata gets thinner and thinner. Now, he says the connection between Kündzop, how am I doing on time? This is running long. Okay. The connection between Kündzop and Döndam is compassion. And this took me a little while to wrap my head around, but we're taught the hard way to let go of grasping. See, by experiencing the suffering of trying to progress or to possess our progress. And this kind of understanding can lead to a compassion. He says ground madhyamaka is based on the fact that the only working basis we have are relative reality and ultimate truth, which can work together. That is a starting point. Relative and absolute truth can work together. Yeah, let me see here. I think I need to. Okay. Talks about samsaric perception. Yep. Okay. Now, here's where I want to pick it up. He introduces a term which I believe is a first for us, which is Kuntag. He says it's the term for a samsaric style of going about our business, which means random labeling. Kun means all, but in this context, it has a sense of random, and tak means labeling or pigeonholing. See, it's random because it is arbitrary and opportunistic, and because each of us labels things depending on the conditions of the moment. And that opens the door to all kinds of deceptions and fantasies, which we act as if this distorted view is real. We act in response to things that exist only in our imagination. And he says pretty much that. He says it is a big deception. And one thing I want to bring up here is I'm reminded of a joke that I used to hear, a little tidbit, that the difference between a neurotic and a psychotic is that a neurotic builds castles in the sky, a psychotic lives in them, which is amusing. But from the Buddhist perspective, actually, we're all living in castles in the sky. We're all living in these imaginary realms that we create, and we put all of this energy, all this discursive thought of developing the legend of I, and brick by brick building up that castle in the sky, and repairing it if it gets damaged, and guarding it. And it's all an illusion. So what else do we have here? So all right, hold on. So Kündzop is what produces this overlay. What is the action of distorting everything? It is, that is what we have to strip away as we proceed. And he says, I would like to make one thing quite clear. When you perceive situations samsarically, you do not perceive them properly. You may think that if you transcend all your samsaric desires, you will not be able to make your own cup of tea or cash your check at the bank. The idea that giving up samsara means leaving behind the pragmatic world is absolutely ludicrous and does not correspond in the least to Buddha Dharma. And I feel that that is a point that's worth making, because it's something that comes up and there is frequently confusion about. That Shunyata does not mean that nothing, it does not mean just the void, the blankness of floating somewhere. It's actually quite the opposite. Things become much more immediate, vivid, energetic, ever-changing. It's really quite wonderful. So, just add this one thing, that understanding comes up and learning to recognize it in ourselves makes it possible to transcend it. It doesn't go away. We just begin to take it into account, to see it for what it is, like the way we see thoughts during meditation. And I think I should leave it right there.
John, you're muted.
Okay. Thank you, Barry. I'm going to recap a bit. We start out the path and we're living in a world of I and lots of other things. All the things that constellate around us and with which we have relationships. our clothes, our friends, our food, everything. The people we love, the people we hate, and everything in between. And all of these things seem to have true existence. They are coming and going in this world. And they do so, you can conceptually, they do so over a period of time. Experientially, they seem to come and go right in the moment. You know, 1 minute you're holding a drumstick from Turkey, and the next minute you're climbing into bed and putting on your bedclothes. And we seem to move through this world of things, constantly acquiring them, shedding them, liking them, disliking them, and everything in between. This is the world of samsara, the world of confusion. It's the world of I and other. These things, you might call them, are momentary creations. We say, there's my computer, here's my leg, here's the sound of a word, and then it's gone. So they're momentary, and they, in their arising, we give them names. Leg, computer, word, sound, sensation, all these things. These names are, one way or another, judgmental. If we label it a drumstick, it's because we're going to eat it. If we label it a pair of pants, it's because we're going to wear it. If we label it a friend, it's because we're going to enjoy their company. And there's always this I relating with the other and naming it in a way that is useful and evaluative to me, I. That naming is what he's talking about as being Kuntag. Kuntag is the labels that we put on the experiences. These experiences are constant flexing, coming and going, but we grab them, as it were, sort of mentally, and fix them for a moment. We say, oh, there's John. Oh, there's Jane. Oh, there's Barry. And it's as though in putting the name on it, we fix it. That's what is meant by fixation. We fixate on it. But these things are a constant flexing, coming and going, dissolving, appearing. The fact that we think that we live in this world of things which we can pick up and put down, take and consume and throw away and whatever we want to do with them, relate to, that's samsara. It's the world of relative truth, relative because there are all these things that exist relative to each other. Here's black, here's white, here's loud, here's soft, here's sweet, here's sour. They're all relative to each other. And we think that they have true existence. I think. But actually what's happening is there's a constant appearing and disappearing. That constant appearing and disappearing is the real nature of things, but we ignore it. We think we live in this world of things that we can pick up and move through. And what is being suggested by the idea of Shunyata is that we live in a very magical, constantly appearing and disappearing world. The problem is we are constantly trying to fix it. It's a magical thing that we fall into that confusion. It's described like this, that they're in the middle of all of this flux of color and shape and form and sound, everything just constantly changing and moving. And suddenly something appears as being a figure and everything else recedes and becomes ground. Is you've got a figure and a ground. There's Barry and there's everything else behind him is unimportant because I'm listening to him or John. Remember, there's my cat and everything else recedes into relative unimportance. And that cat, that John, that Barry implies the existence of a perceiver here, I. You can't really see I. You can't try to, it's like trying to see your own eyeballs, but it's implied. And then you go back and forth and you create a whole relationship. These names that we give to the world of appearance, the world of experience, are what are called Kuntag in this chapter. Now, the real world is the world which is called Shunyata, which means empty. Empty of what? Empty of Kuntag, empty of names. It means that all of these things arise and they have nothing really to do with the names. The names are just labels. He calls them price tags that we affix to them. And in affixing those names, those labels, those price tags, we veil them. Now we only see the price tag. It's worth $3.98. We only see the name. It's a table. I can use it. And we're ignoring the immediacy of the experience because we're seeing it in terms of utility for me, for or against me. When we begin to see the world stripped of our labels, that doesn't mean you have to throw them away, but we can see it as it is, not in terms of being a table, a chair, a tree, $3.98, but as it actually is. That is the world of reality. That is the world of Shunyata. It's the world that is also called Döndam. Döndam is the word for absolute truth. Absolute truth means this is the truth of the way things actually are, beyond these little labels that are so temporary and flimsy. And this world, and in this world of absolute truth, there are things that arise, rocks, stars, people, turkeys for Thanksgiving, whatever it might be, sounds, smells, tastes, all of it, thoughts. But they have no true ongoing existence that the names that we give them imply. They are a constant appearing and disappearing in the moment. And in that constant appearing and disappearing, and once we begin to tune into it, there is tremendous freedom. Freedom from the strictures of these labels, of the good and the bad. Freedom from worrying about me and my relationship to them. And more than that, there's tremendous brilliance and vividness because the labels, the price tags, the understandings that with which we go through the world gray everything out. It's like we're wearing sunglasses. We constantly are interpreting our worlds. And as Barry pointed out, in the God realm, gods see water as ambrosia, as elixir of life. In the hell realm, hell beings see it as molten iron, painful to even touch, much less drink. And everything in between, every confused psychological state sees water a little bit differently, or maybe a lot differently. And everything else too. That's why hell beings think they're living in hell, where everything is burning and is painful. And a god, standing right next to that hell being, sees it as being beautiful, heaven. This is the power of Kuntag, to transform the world, to cover it with a label and with a price tag and with a judgment. And this confused samsaric beings, we walk through our worlds, distorting them in small or in large, little by little or in great, powerful detail. So we have absolute truth, Shunyata, which is the freedom from this. And Shunyata is made up of not only space, empty space, but of all the things that are moving through it. This hand as it moves across the screen, and now it's gone. These words as they come out of the mouth, and now they're gone. That's all part of Shunyata too. And so you get that slogan that Barry repeated earlier on. Things arise, and yet they don't exist. They don't have any true, solid, ongoing existence. They're just appearances. They don't exist. They don't have any ongoing being. They're just appearances. And yet they arise. Here they are. It's this beautiful, this is the description of Shunyata. It's a beautiful, vivid, ever-changing, meaningful world. Because in that change that we're constantly experiencing, that's where the meaning is communicated. If things didn't change, they couldn't communicate what they are. They couldn't communicate anything. It's the fact that these words are coming out of my mouth and disappearing. There is communication. If we were frozen, unchanging, couldn't have it. Kuntag is the constant attempt to freeze things by applying labels. And that is what is given up along the path. One begins to, you still use words, you still speak, but you don't believe it because you're actually experiencing the reality as it arises and passes away. How does this happen? How do we begin to come in contact with Shunyata, with this vivid, meaningful world? The world is described as not only empty of concept. This is the Mahayana view, but it was, as Trungpa Rinpoche is getting into now, it's not only empty of meaning, of kuntag, of these labels, these judgments, but it's extraordinarily vivid. That vividness is called luminosity in the way it's translated. The word in Tibetan is ursel. Sometimes it's translated as that all phenomena are pellucid. They are glowing with lucidity when one sees them as they are and not through the veil of utility, of how can I use this? Of distraction. You're barely there. You're so lost, and one is so lost in thoughts. Walking around in a dream of what I'm going to do tonight, what am I going to do tomorrow? Does anybody love me? Oh, I hate this person. Oh, I'm having a great time. Oh, whatever it might be, we tell ourselves these stories that fill our days. And we walk around in a cloud. Shunyata is to come out of that cloud. And it contains both relative and absolute truth. Because in order to talk about absolute truth is that things do not have any true existence. They are not the labels that we stick on them. They're a constant and indescribable appearing and disappearing. And at the same time, there are these things which arise and disappear. You can't grasp them. And yet there's this beautiful display. Kensei Rinpoche says, you sit there and you watch it like a traveler on a train watching the scenery going by the window. Like an old person watching children at play. It's like an old person because you're so relaxed. You don't have to do anything mentally. The only way you come into Shunyata is through complete relaxation, mental relaxation. This is the meaning of Vipassana. This is the meaning of that practice that we do every day. Because when we practice Vipassana, we are coming present, out of the dream, out of the thought, and seeing what's actually happening. Even if we're seeing our thoughts, you can do it that way too. You can see your thoughts. They're objects of perception, just like rocks and stars and sounds and tastes and smells and bodily sensations, the objects of the senses. So this path is really about coming present. We study this intellectually because it helps motivate us to actually do the work, the practice. And the practice is you sit on your cushion and you come back. If you only come back a little bit, it's a good thing. You've come back. Come back to this. Come back out of the dream of self-aggrandizement, the dream of self-promotion, the dream of I'm going to get better. And we come back and suddenly here we are. Every time we do that, we are relaxing into awareness. Awareness is utterly relaxed, utterly effortless, because it is what we are at core. It is our fundamental nature. It is our Buddha nature, in fact, our awakened, enlightened nature, that awareness. And we come back to it by letting go of those dreams. And in that, we see, in the process of doing this, we see these two kinds of relative truth that Barry was alluding to, or speaking of. The pure and the impure. The pure relative truth is part of absolute truth. It's just the way absolute truth is expressed. It's the fact that things arise, this gesture, these words, and yet they don't exist. They don't have any true ongoing existence. They're gone in a not even a nanosecond. They're just gone as soon as they appear. They arise, and yet they do not exist. This is the pure relative truth. The impure relative truth is, we say, I really like the looks of that other person. I want to have a relationship with them. How can I do it? And we create this whole drama scenario, and we get into all kinds of stories about ourselves and our lives, about me and all the different others. Do I like that sunset? Whatever it is. We're doing it so much, so often. And that's the impure relative truth. That's the relative truth that's tainted by Kuntag, conception. It's Kündzop. Kündzop is both pure and impure. Kündzop is the Madhyamikan term, and they really didn't distinguish between pure and impure. It was the Yogacharans who did. And Trungpa Rinpoche felt that was the Yogacharans' real contribution, that they understood the difference between pure and impure relative truth, and they called the pure relative truth Paratantra. That's just the fact that here's a computer, and there's a light bulb, and this is a body, and here's a sound, and all that stuff. And the impure relative truth they called Parikalpita, which means confusion, illusion. And that is when we attach all these labels, stories, price tags, whatever you want to call it, to these things that are arising and passing and are not even graspable for an instant as a thing. Just a constant presenting. Beautiful. And so, I'm not even going through my notes on this chapter. I should. Let's see. Shunyata is the perspective that arises when we relate to the phenomenal world, the world of rocks and stars and people and dogs, purely on the level of perception. No thought about, no judgments, no Kuntag. That's when we see Shunyata. That's what Shunyata means. That's what it's empty of. Thoughts, judgments, Kuntag, stories, price tags. He says Shunyata is not some great understanding or revelation. It is seeing things as they are, beyond our labeling, beyond our stories. Now, Barry also mentioned this idea of footprints, because what happens is we begin to have experiences of Shunyata. They begin to come to us, especially if we practice, and especially if we have discipline in our practice. That means that we actually practice regularly and really give ourselves to this. Realize how important it is, that this is our opportunity. It's so easy to waste time. I testify. I've done so much of it in my lifetime. So what one is doing is really adopting the discipline of meditation, both on the cushion. That's sort of like the lab experience, you know. It helps you tremendously to meditate on the cushion in a disciplined, regular way. And then as you walk down the street, that's even more powerful. If you can remember to come back to awareness out of dream. So hard to do. We're so habituated, but every little time is tremendously important. He says, when we begin to see things stripped of their veils, preconceptions, we begin to see the isness of things, which is also called tatata, or truth. Tatata literally means as it is. It is the dharmaness, or dharmata, dharmaness, dharmata. Table is table, so what? It is just a simple table, empty of kuntag, empty of that label, empty of that judgment. Every phenomena that we experience, he says, has a quality of emptiness. If we have the eyes to see, if we can remember to come back to awareness. It's so simple. Awareness is effortless. It's not like we have to build up muscles. He says, without understanding of emptiness, the absence of thingness. Thingness is just another label. It's a thing. And when we say it's a thing, we assume it's ongoing instead of it being an immediate experience. Without understanding of emptiness, the absence of thingness, we begin to see things very clearly, precisely, and fantastically vividly, he says, because we no longer lay conceptual interpretations on them. We begin to see people and things as they are, directly and simply. This is called the discovery of unconditional truth, which is Döndam, again, absolute truth, unconditional. Dön means truth, and Dam means absolute, unconditional. Such truth is not a matter of beliefs or theories. It is self-existent truth. It's not a story. It's not it's not. There's no credo. It's not like, you got to say the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, and everything that revolves around that. A whole conceptual story. It ain't that kind of truth. It's absolutely immediate and direct, and wordless. It's the experience of spaciousness and precision combined. And this means that we begin to develop real heart and a sense of appreciation, because we're giving up self-aggrandizement. Every time we come completely present, self, I, evaporates. There's no room for it when you're totally awake and present in the moment. And the strength in us that's built into us, and this is such a gift, is the Buddha nature, Tathagata. It's what we fundamentally are at core. So it's not like, as Barry said, it's not like something that you have to create. It's something that we discover that was always there. It was hidden. One of the constant metaphors is like, we're like beggars, poor people living in a hovel, unaware that there is a treasure just below the surface of the ground. And we're living in utter poverty. That's the metaphor for Buddha nature. It's in us, waiting. He says, we become more eager to realize things as they are. And that eagerness brings us to the attitude that we need to relate with the phenomenal world simply and as no big deal, with a sense of ongoing softness or warmth. He says discipline is important because we still have not quite seen the emptiness of the vase, of the emptiness of the table properly and completely. And that's why it's so important. Every time we sit down on the cushion, we are making the gesture of giving up our egotism. Ego always wants entertainment, and there's so little, if any, entertainment on our cushions, is there? Oh my gosh. Exercise in boredom. It's a slap in the face to ego every time one does it. He says, the point of applying the teachings of emptiness and compassion. Compassion go hand in glove with emptiness, because when we come present and we begin to see this vivid world, there's great love and joy for it and for the people and beings in it. So it generates compassion. It generates the desire to communicate, to connect. He says, the point of applying the teachings of emptiness and compassion to your everyday life is to make the Dharma real as opposed to fantasy. It takes commitment. You might feel that it is becoming too personal and begin to panic. But I'm afraid that this is necessary to experience who you are and what you are. It's like letting a doctor draw blood. It's personal and intimate, opening up things as they are. He loved these bloody metaphors. How about that one that's coming up at the end of the chapter about his accident where he had to have his lips sewn without anesthesia? And by the way, that accident, which occurred in England, I guess, I thought it was Scotland, but he said England in this chapter, or at least the editors did. Here's the irony. He had in recent years, come down from Tibet, and I guess probably the reason that he had the accident was altitude issues. And he was driving a car, and it's so perfect. He crashed the car through the window of a joke shop. How perfect for Trungpa Rinpoche. But he spent the rest of his life crippled from that accident. Never complained. I never heard a complaint, not one. So he says, we can relax into prajna and into shunyata. Prajna, you see, prajna is something that we can practice right now, and that will lead us into shunyata. Prajna is clear seeing, coming back from dream, seeing this world as it is, instead of through the veil of whether we like it or dislike it, or how we can use it. Like and dislike, real problems. They're so repetitive, stale in our minds. He says you need to give into the teachings. There has to be a mingling of your whole being with the Dharma. Otherwise, the Dharma becomes an alien entity. And then he quotes Gampopa's instructions. I thought that was nice. Grant your blessings so that my mind may be one with the Dharma. There it is, the thing we chant every day. So we can relax into prajna and into shunyata. It's not about theory at all, but about personal experience, being genuine and straightforward. We have no axe to grind. We're just being an ordinary human being coming present for the world. Open and raw. You have become a 100% genuine person. No secret agendas. You know, how many times have you spoken to someone and you can see that they're saying one thing and thinking another? This is not that. You feel that your stronghold of self-protection is useless and futile. In fact, when we try to protect ourselves, all we're doing is sealing ourselves off in our own prison. When you begin to give in to the Dharma, when you do so, you begin to go much faster along the path. It is a question of personal surrendering rather than aspiring to the Dharma in a theistic way, meaning it's not a matter of ambition, like I'm going to become a really terrific Buddha, and then people will admire me and give me money. It's surrendering to these teachings, which are so about being an ordinary human being, a real human being, a genuine human being. He says it's extremely personal. We might feel that our territory, our privacy, is being invaded. That's great. He says, that's great. It means we are getting somewhere. We should let our privacy be further invaded so that we could dissolve into the sea of Shunyata. This is a real letting go, this process, which is scary, can be. The scariness is a kind of holding on. But it's also scary because we're beginning to let go. Let go into what? Into this world without purpose. A world of appreciation. Almost finished here. You can finish at any time. He says, he just keeps saying it again. Shunyata means that you have no personal territory. How about that one? No personal game, no actual personal entity that provokes the notion of your existence. You are still what you are, but you is not what you are. You is not. You are not even a grain of sand, not even dust. You don't exist. Wow. Therefore, you exist so much. You are brilliant, luminous, skillful, and at peace. You actually can work with others. You have not vanished into thin air. Then he talks about the 7 noble riches that come along on the path. They're actually sort of a beginning stage of the Mahayana path, of the Bodhisattva path. And they're you can contemplate them, not being distracted by sense experiences. So easy to get distracted. Diligent practice, that's the number 2 of the 7 noble riches. Regularly scheduled, not distracted by forms of entertainment, like eating, which could be an excuse to take a break. Joy or faith, you just do the right thing simply and directly. Virtue in this case is healthiness. It is psychological and physical wholeness. There is a feeling of joy that what you are doing is worthy. Generosity, it becomes your habit to be generous. It's so natural because there's such appreciation for the world and the giving up of why? Composure or modesty means that you're contained. You're not going out all over the place. Reasonableness, friendly and reasonable. And finally, knowledge or prajna, which includes both intellectual and experiential knowledge. I'm reading an interesting book right now, which I'd recommend. It's called Think Fast, Slow. And it's by a Nobel Prize winner whose name escapes me. Just having a senior moment. But it's all about the two kinds of thinking. What he's calling here intellectual and experiential. Experiential is that you know this is a computer sitting in front of you without even thinking about it. Bing! That's what's called System 1 thinking, System 1 intelligence. System 2 intelligence is trying to figure out what all these words mean. System 2 intelligence is, what's the product of 17 times 23? And suddenly you're involved in thinking. And here he's talking about knowledge or prajna, which includes both intellectual thinking, like product of 17 times 23, and experiential knowledge. That's a cow. You don't have to think about it. So wrapping up, the point's not to be good, but to be sane, to come back to awareness and not be lost in our dreams, each one of which is so different. Remember the realms, the God realm, the hell realm, the hungry ghost realm, the animal realm. All these are psychological portraits of people who are lost in Kuntag, lost in labeling, lost in stories. And we all do it to a greater or lesser degree. Daniel Kahneman, thank you. That's the guy who wrote the book. Think fast, think slow. Think fast, slow. Brilliant guy. And about the wrong decisions we make all the time because we're thinking fast. There's this famous experiment that I was reading about last night where you take a 4-year-old child and put him in a room and there's a cookie. And you tell him or her, if you wait 15 minutes, you'll get 2 cookies. But if you don't want to wait the 15 minutes, eat that cookie, that 1 cookie. Some kids eat the 1 cookie. Some kids manage to somehow distract themselves. There's nothing in there to distract themselves with, by the way. No toys, no television, nothing. But somehow they manage to wait and they get the 2 cookies. And they find that the people who, as they grow up, they've done studies on this, who manage to wait, who use that thought process that says, if I wait, I'll get more, have higher scores on intelligence tests and achieve more in life. It's funny. So Shunyata has a haunting quality, which, and this is really interesting and something to contemplate. This haunting quality comes from a sense that nothing is outside. It's like you're stepping off a plank. It's like you are suddenly moving into a world where there is no reference point, no place that you're coming from or going to, which is actually the truth, because we live in a universe that's expanding infinitely. So the idea that we're going from some place meaningful to another place meaningful is pretty trivial. So it has this haunting quality, Shunyata. And what's the hauntingness? It's that we're not going from one place to another. It's that there's no I. He says the Bodhisattva path, this path, not only tells you how to meditate and how to experience reality, but also how to handle society. Because the biggest work of the Bodhisattva is dealing with society. So the 7 treasures are applicable right now, including joy and generosity, modesty, reasonableness, mind. Everything matures on the path because you are moving forward. There is no stepping back and there is no reverse. I highlighted that. He loved to say that kind of thing. There is no reverse and there is no stepping back. Especially when you get to Tantra, which is described like being a snake entering a bamboo tube. Can't turn around. So we've got absolute truth, which is that nothing exists. We've got relative truth, which is the things which don't exist. Right? And there are two versions of the relative truth. There's the relative truth seen in the context of absolute truth, which means you're seeing it real. It's constantly evaporating right in front of you, changing from one thing into the next. And there is the false relative truth, which is conceptualized, as though things are frozen, as though things are solidified, as though things are good and bad for me, to me, and for somebody else. But even when they're good and bad for somebody else, it's really about me, because I want them to be good or bad for that other person. If they're my enemy, I want them to be bad for them. And if they're my friend, I want them to be good for them. So the relative truth, you got it with that conceptual overlay, which is called Kuntag, judgmental, evaluative, and you have it stripped, where it's the expression, you might say, of absolute truth, of Döndam, that it has no true essence. It's just this beautiful, vivid, meaningful appearing. And this is so important when you get to Tantra, as I'm hoping so many of you will. Tantra is all about the meaning that is conveyed by the beautiful arising and passing away of the phenomenal world. And that is only revealed, only brought to the practitioner through the practice of effortless, clear awareness. That's how it comes. So the practice that we are doing daily, that you are doing, of practicing Vipassana, it goes all the way from the beginning to the end of the path. It's the same practice. What happens is that you begin to get better at it, or that's almost a contradiction in terms. You can't get better at it. What happens is that you dissolve into it. So we could have a discussion. Wow, only have 8 minutes before 7 o'clock, before 9 o'clock. But we do have the discussion group tomorrow.
John,
Yes.
it seems like, unless I'm conflating these terms, that there's a lot of overlap between different terms, like the pure Kündzop and Paratantra. Is
Yes.
that they're saying the same thing?
Yes. Good.
Okay.
That's a good catch. That's true. Absolutely true.
Okay.
Paratantra is pure Kündzop.
Okay. And then, because a few classes ago, you sent out that email with Parinispana for absolute truth, Paratantra for true relative truth. And then there's Parakalpita for false or distorted relative truth. Does Shunyata fit under one of those or no?
Yes.
Okay.
Shunyata would fit under Parinispana.
Okay.
But we're not going to go into the actual, see, this is Yogacharan, these are Yogacharan terms. And Trungpa Rinpoche said in one of these chapters that he liked Yogacara for relative truth, not so much for absolute. He preferred Madhyamaka. So when they come to the way they describe Parinishpana, we're not even going to go into it here. It has to do with, they came up with an idea of that everything is mind. And that was blown up by later Buddhists. It was blown up and then it was used. It's funny. But the Madhyamakans are much better about absolute truth. And really, when we talk about absolute truth here, which is what the Yogacharans call Parinishpana, but when we talk about it, we're talking about it in a very Madhyamakan way, which is that nothing has any, that all the labels we affix to our experience are just that. They're labels, they're pointers. They are not the true thing. And they don't define it.
Is that what they mean when absolute truth is even empty of itself? Is that?
Yeah, I guess so.
Okay.
Yeah. Absolute truth is reality. It includes relative truth. You can't have absolute truth without relative truth. Well, I mean, theoretically, I guess you could, but they arise together. And the fact that all of this stuff has no true own being, but is just, except as we label it having that, but it's just this constant appearing and disappearing in the field of our awareness. That's the absolute truth. They have lots of names for these things. I mean, absolute truth is called, Buddha nature, dharmata, it means dharmaness, like shunyata, dharmata. It's called the dharma body of the Buddha, dharmakaya. That's absolute truth. And I'm sure there are other names too that are just not coming to mind at the moment.
Ta. Would that be?
That's a good one. Yeah. Ta. Ta means as it is. That's absolute truth. But they all contain the relative truth. It's like you can't talk about the fact that things don't exist without using the word things. That's the relative truth. So there's this constant, beautiful display, of everything, of gongs, and people and words and books. It's gorgeous. And the way we begin to experience it, I mean, there are people in this room who are going into retreat. That's a good one. Then you get alone with your mind. Retreat, solitary retreat.
We only have
But be careful. Huh?
We only have a couple minutes, and Barbara's had her hand up, and also
Okay, sorry.
Robert.
All right,
So,
Barbara.
Gotta make this quick.
Yes. It sounds to me like, conceptualizing things is a practical thing to do. But to fixated on it means that you're carrying it too far?
Yeah. Yes. So you got to say pass the salt. But then when the person passes you the salt, you're examining the shaker and saying, gee, I don't like this particular shaker. It's dirty or it's ugly or, I think I'll just push it away. Then you've gotten caught up in concept.
I see. So okay. Yeah. I'm wondering how I can come away from this class with something practical that I can do. So if, for example, one of my bad habits is being very defensive, sometimes I'll just say, no, I didn't do that before I can really know whether I did or not. So if I can practice connecting to absolute truth, that would be like, well, dropping defensiveness or recognizing defensiveness. Would that be appropriate?
Oh, yeah.
Just,
Oh, yeah.
so maybe I can't stop being defensive instantly, but I can recognize it as fast as possible and maybe just explain that I need more time to think about it or something of that nature.
There's so many ways. I mean, probably the core way is to keep studying and practicing your meditation. But
On the cushion.
on the cushion and in daily life by coming back out of dream into awareness in this present moment. Those are the main ways. But then, for instance, you might adopt a practice such as Ikebana, the practice of flower arranging, which is a meditative practice, or art, painting, and there are artists in our group. And that can be a meditative practice of awareness. Or you could read the Lojong slogans and read Trungpa Rinpoche's explanation of the Lojong slogans, or there are others that are good. Pema is actually very good on them. What's the title of her book?
Start Where You Are.
Is that it? Start Where You Are?
I think so.
Val, you know the book.
Well, there's so many.
No,
No time to lose. I like.
no, I'm talking about Pema's book on the Lojong slogans.
Oh, okay.
She has a book on them. And so, for instance, relative, and this is we're going to have to end here. You talk about opening up, and there's one of the slogans is drive all blames into one, which means you take the blame. That's a hard one. And it has to do very much with giving up your egotism. 99 times out of 100, you can take the blame and there's no practical negative consequence except to your ego. And then it's really interesting to see what happens. But it can be so hard when you know that it's their fault. And that's a terrific practice. And he says in his book, he says, you can do it. I've done it thousands of times myself. And I believe him. I can remember.
Okay,
that.
thank you, John.
We're really getting into wonderful stuff here. Thank you. That was a great question. Well, we should end, everybody, because it is time for people to go to bed. 9 o'clock. So we have the discussion group tomorrow. Come if you want. There's so many people I would have liked to have heard from. You can see all these faces. Okay, so let's close with Meg, you want to lead us in the closing chant? I'll put it up.
We'll close by dedicating the merit earned by our practice for the benefit of all sentient beings.
Meg, unmute yourself.
By this merit, may all obtain omniscience. May it defeat the enemy, wrongdoing, from the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. From the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. By the confidence of the golden sun of the great east, may the lotus garden of the Rigden's wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory.
Thank you.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Barry.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Meg.
Great.
Very
Thank
you.
Thank you.
Great
Have a
class.
good one.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
Good night. We'll
Good
see you
night.
tomorrow. Please come to
Good night,
the
everyone.
discussion. Okay.
Yeah, tomorrow.
Thank
Special.
you. Thank you. Night all.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Yeah.